Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, we've all been there, haven't we? That sinking feeling when you know you're late, the quick text, showing up looking a bit flustered.
Absolutely. It's universal.
So today we're diving into something that seems simple, but is actually pretty complex. Being late and, saying sorry for it.
Right. And how we talk about it.
Exactly. We're drawing from a conversation between English learners on the English Podcast Zone. It was episode 6 called I'm Sorry English Learning Podcast Conversation.
A great source for real-world language use.
Yeah. So think of this as us kind of listening in, but with a goal. We want to pull out the key phrases people use when they're late, really get what they mean, and also, interestingly, look at how different cultures see punctuality.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how just talking about being late opens up so much about language and, well, cultural norms.
Totally. So by digging into this chat, you listening are going to grab some really useful vocabulary and hopefully get a better feel for these little social situations.
You really will. Practical stuff.
Okay, so let's set the scene from their podcast. It starts with a boss, waiting, maybe a bit impatiently.
Understandably, perhaps.
When we start hearing the reasons people are late. First, it comes through an assistant, kind of relaying messages.
The gatekeeper of excuses.
Yeah. And then we hear directly from the employees. The first few reasons we get are things like someone got tied up with a client, another hit a huge traffic jam,
The classic.
and a third person's meeting just ran over. Sound familiar?
Oh, definitely. Like you said, sounds like a typical Monday morning for a lot of people.
Right. But these aren't just random words, are they?
No, not at all. They're chosen phrases, ways to frame why you're late. Often they subtly try to explain it, maybe even minimize personal fault.
Let's unpack that first one.
Yeah.
Got tied up with a client. The original podcast speakers did a good job explaining this.
Yeah, they did.
When you say you're tied up, it suggests you were busy with something important, right? Something you couldn't just drop.
Exactly. It implies an obligation, something unavoidable almost.
The source gave some good examples like, sorry I'm late, honey, I got tied up at the office. We've all heard or said that.
Or, I was tied up on the phone all afternoon. You get the picture. Busy, couldn't get away.
They even mentioned, I got tied up in traffic, which is slightly different but uses the same core idea. You feel kind of bound, unable to leave.
That imagery is key, I think. Being tied up, like you're physically restrained by the task or the situation, it subtly shifts focus. Like, hey, external demands took over.
Less about, I managed my time poorly, and more about, something else held me up.
Precisely. It can be a very effective phrase.
Okay, then the next one, huge traffic jam. Pretty literal, this one.
Yeah, we all know that image. Cars just stopped everywhere.
Yeah. But the source also mentioned a related, maybe more dramatic term, huge pileup.
Ah, yes. That implies something more specific. A multi-car accident.
Right, which definitely explains a major delay. It signals something more serious than just standard heavy traffic.
Exactly. A traffic jam can be frustratingly normal, A pileup, though, suggests a significant unexpected event. It usually buys you a bit more understanding.
Okay, another very common one they covered is running late.
Oh, yeah, you hear this constantly.
The original hosts noted just how frequent it is. It's basically saying, just so you know, I'm not going to make it on time.
It's proactive, in a way.
Yeah. Examples like, Jane is running late, she'll be here in 10 minutes.
Or texting, traffic is really bad, so I'm running late.
Or even, I'm running a bit late, so please start without me. It's about managing expectations, isn't it?
Absolutely. It shows you're aware of the time, aware you're delayed, and you're communicating it. It's generally seen as considerate.
Good point. And the last one in this initial batch was ran over.
Right. Specific to things with a schedule.
Like his last meeting ran over. It clearly explains why Scott was late for whatever was next. The previous thing went longer than planned.
Exactly. Again, it points to an external factor, the schedule of the previous event. It's clear and usually pretty acceptable as a reason.
Okay, but then there was the Starbucks excuse.
Oh, yes. The coffee line.
One person apparently said they were late because the line was, quote, way, way too long, like a 20-minute wait. And the hosts in that original podcast, well, they didn't seem too impressed with that as a work excuse.
No, their take was definitely that it's maybe not the best reason for workplace tardiness.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What counts as a good excuse versus a bad one?
It does. It highlights the subjectivity. A huge pileup. Okay, uncontrollable, a prior meeting running over, understandable. But a long wait for coffee?
Might be seen as a personal choice, maybe poor planning.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in a professional context, it brings in that element of perceived priorities.
Interesting stuff. Okay, let's switch gears slightly to what the original podcast called their fluency builder. Some nuances of time-related phrases.
Good idea. These little details matter.
First, in a sec. They explained it means very soon, maybe roughly a minute.
But as they noted, it's often an exaggeration, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not literally 1 second. It just feels immediate. They contrasted it with in a minute, which might imply a slightly longer wait, maybe 3 to 5 minutes.
It's conversational shorthand. In a sec feels quicker, more urgent, even if the actual time isn't that different from in a minute, which gives a bit more breathing room.
Funny how we use these subtle distinctions.
It's all pragmatic language, really, understanding the implied meaning beyond the literal words.
Right. Okay, next fluency point. Stuck in traffic. We talked about jams and pileups, but stuck really hits that feeling of immobility.
It does. That sense of frustration of being trapped. I got stuck in traffic. It conveys that lack of control. You're not just delayed, you are stuck.
Yeah, you could almost feel the engine idling. And related to that, backed up for miles.
Ah, that paints a picture, doesn't it?
Definitely. It tells you the scale of the problem. Not just a little slowdown, but a major, major blockage. Probably caused by that pileup we mentioned.
Exactly. Traffic was backed up for miles.
Yeah.
Implies a widespread issue, making your lateness seem almost unavoidable. It emphasizes the severity.
Okay, now for something really fascinating they brought up, cultural differences.
Yes, this is so important. How different cultures view time and punctuality.
They contrasted, for example, the often strict punctuality expected in places like North America or Germany,
Right, where being on time is often seen as a sign of respect and efficiency.
with what's sometimes called, Latino time or Hispanic time, where there might be a more relaxed attitude, especially for social events, maybe even some meetings. Arriving a bit later is more the norm.
It's a crucial distinction. What's considered late in one place might be perfectly normal, even expected somewhere else. There isn't one universal standard.
Some cultures prioritize the relationship or finishing the previous conversation over strict adherence to the clock for the next thing.
Precisely. And understanding this can prevent a lot of misunderstandings, especially in international business or travel.
They also mentioned different work start routines, like in some offices, you're expected to be actively working right on the dot,
Yep. Boots on the ground, fingers on the keyboard.
whereas in others, there might be a buffer period, grabbing coffee, settling in, a quick chat before officially starting.
These ingrained norms around time really vary. Being aware shows cultural sensitivity. It's not about judging, it's about understanding the local context.
The original podcast even invited listeners to share their own experiences with timekeeping in different countries on their website, which is a great idea.
Absolutely. Because hearing those personal stories really drives home how varied these perceptions are. It makes you reflect on your own assumptions.
It really does. So knowing the right phrase is helpful, but knowing the cultural context for punctuality is maybe even more critical for how your explanation lands.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, finally, the original source had a vocabulary review section. Super helpful for reinforcing everything.
Yeah, always good to recap.
They listed key terms like punctual, backed up, late, sleep in,
Got tied up, tardiness, hustle.
running late, ran over, stuck in traffic.
In a sec, huge traffic jam, and pile up. All the things we've basically touched on.
And they gave example sentences too, like, I'm going to be late today because I'm stuck in traffic.
Or, the meeting ran over by more than 30 minutes. Helps put it in context.
Jane is running late. She'll be here in 10 minutes.
Sorry, I'm late, honey. I got tied up at the office.
And the accident backed up traffic for miles. Seeing them used like that really helps cement them, doesn't it?
It really does. Context is everything for actually learning to use vocabulary, not just recognize it.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've covered quite a bit. We've looked at specific phrases for explaining lateness, from the common ones like running late or got tied up,
To the more descriptive ones, like being stuck in traffic or seeing traffic backed up for miles, and those little nuances, like in a sec.
and maybe just as importantly, we've touched on how culture plays a huge role in how we perceive time and punctuality.
Yeah, understanding those cultural norms is vital. It's not just about the words you choose, but how they fit into the bigger picture of expectations.
Exactly. Picking the right phrase, delivered with an awareness of the cultural context that's key to navigating these potentially awkward moments effectively.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Consider your own background, your own experiences. Can you think of a time you really noticed a difference in how people treated punctuality? maybe traveling or working with international colleagues.
Hmm. And reflecting on that, how could some of the language or even just the awareness of cultural differences we discussed today
Hmm.
help you handle a similar situation differently in the future? It's a really interesting mix of language, culture, and, well, just life happening.
Definitely something to ponder.